Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Darsh Shah.
And I'm Dr. Altamash Raja.
And welcome to Medicine Redefined,
a podcast where we will explore the often overlooked but necessary components of health, what we consider to be the fundamentals.
We will investigate topics and practices that can give you and your patients the best chance to optimize a healthy lifestyle. It's time to move the needle forward and put the health back in healthcare. Our guest today is Dr. Benjamin Morrell. Ben is a mental health physician and high-performance coach at High Performance Mental Health. He graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Biology at the University of Central Oklahoma and went on to receive his medical degree at the University of Oklahoma in 2019. Ben matched into psychiatry residency at Wake Forest Medical Center, but soon realized that going through the healthcare system didn't match his passions or purpose. He decided to leave residency and life coach others on his own terms, healing through his own experiences and expertise with trauma, burnout, motivation, and becoming the best version of himself. In this episode, Ben was amazingly vulnerable. He took the time to explain his own struggles with PTSD, which started at a very young age for him. And what was amazing about this episode was how he has chosen a path to not only inspire himself, but inspire others. I mean, he is on a mission at this point to really life coach others and master mental health and bring on a vision that allows others to understand a deeper perspective. And if you're like me, I am all about the deeper perspective. So this conversation has been absolutely one of my favorites throughout this entire podcast series. So without further ado, let's live and learn and understand through Ben's story. All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome back. We got my brother in the house today, Dr. Ben Morrell. Ben, how are you doing today?
5-star reviews for me, man. I'm so excited to be able to share a message with you. And anytime I get to talk to you is a good time.
Absolutely, man. So what was it? About 2 weeks ago, maybe we kind of kicked it live on Instagram, had an awesome talk. And, I was talking to my co-host, Altamash, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, man. He's a new father, so he's definitely super busy, especially with fellowship too. But he's going to miss out on this talk, man, because I know you've got a lot of perspective and your journey is an incredible one. And what you're doing now is pretty impressive. So let's get into it, but I want to first start off with who you were, and your journey. So who was Ben? Who was a young version of Ben? What were his values? What did he care about?
Man, let's jump into this one. So I'll just start it off with my father was born on a Native American reservation in 1948. Yeah, so he's old enough to be my grandpa, and so he's half white, half Native. In pretty tough place at a tough time. So you can only imagine how hard-nosed that guy was, or is rather. He's a great person. So that was, I would say, the beginnings of it is Oklahoma, right? So it's a very interesting place in general for culture. It's definitely a little bit of a melting pot, but for the most part, nobody goes there unless you have to go there. So right, so that's
Sure.
where we're raised. And just from a geographical and epidemiologic standpoint, it's like number 2 in obesity, number 2 in mental health.
Mm-hmm.
It's some of the worst you could go. So that's the culture. So I guess we definitely grew up old school. I have 11 siblings, of which I'm 9. Yeah, I'm the 9th. So I'm middle lower tier. So essentially I did all the work and didn't get any of the credit. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Right. But yeah, so young Benjamin, I would say that I experienced a lot of adverse childhood experiences. Of course, you have that many children running around unsupervised in southern rural Oklahoma. You're going to see some crazy stuff for sure. And something bad's going to happen eventually. But yeah, my little brother got hit by a truck right in front of me when I was 5.
Oh.
He got ran over, backed over. So, that whole adverse childhood experience literature, I don't know if you looked through that, really sets the old stage for a lot of, addiction, chronic diseases. For me, it was more of the PTSD variety. So truthfully, I went through up until like age 18. It was kind of honestly, I don't remember a whole lot of it because just kind of like dissociating, kind of hanging out, you know what I mean? doing my thing. Luckily had a very strong family unit that kept me going, but that was most of it. Hard nose, blue collar, get the work done. We don't complain about nothing. Dad's a plumber, so I grew up plumbing, that kind of environment.
Wow, man. Well, going through that, right, that PTSD, was there any option for you that you were thinking of getting help at that point? Like, what was your outlet? What did you do to maybe stop the dissociation,
Nothing.
Yeah.
So that's the thing about, poor or areas where they don't have a lot of access to healthcare. Like I was blind until I didn't realize this, but I wasn't actually dumb. I couldn't see the board because I was like, I was very, I didn't have very good eyesight. Right.
Yeah.
So I didn't figure that out until I was like 15. You know
Oh
what
my
I mean?
gosh.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, that's why I was bad at baseball. I couldn't see the ball.
Yeah.
So that really helped. And that's an example, but for mental health, absolutely nothing. You know, if you know anything about, Native American culture, you really just, or country folks in general, you just don't do that, man. You're just not going to talk about
Gotcha.
that kind of thing. Yeah, you're just going to pony back up, and they really just don't even acknowledge it, to be honest.
Yeah. So what got you interested then in medicine and then eventually, going into psychiatry residency?
Well, there's definitely a couple of things, a host of things, right? So, of course, growing up in that community, you see so many people struggling with their mental health, and there are people very, very close to me that had psychotic breaks, just really struggling with ADHD, obviously, and a lot of personality disorders, and really a lot of it stemmed from, truthfully, my brother. He's allowed me to speak about this openly, but he was dealing with a heroin addiction for 10 years, my entire time during medical school residency. So watching that unfold in front of me, and then my older brother was also into meth and opioids, so I really saw that take off. Wasn't a huge fan of that, and that being said, we had all experienced the same things. And people with trauma, there's a couple different ways they're going to go about it to ease that pain within. For them, a lot of people, they seek external means to fill that gap. The other portion of them will become hyper focused on tasks, because if your attention is fully involved in something else, then it won't be on the pain. So that was the route that I took, and that's why you got to choose medicine, right? Because that's it's not a choice. You got to hyper focus, or you ain't going to make it.
Yeah.
But essentially, I would say I lived my whole life in a kind of spaceless, drifty area until I was like 18. And you'll always hear me preach purpose for this reason. But my little brother Cohen was the one who actually, he lived after he got hit by that truck. And I raised a person with intellectual disabilities, physical disabilities. So I was taking him to school, giving him baths and all that stuff. First of all, he's hilarious. He's like a giant 250-pound teddy bear. That's awesome. And without him, I'm being serious. I don't know if I even be here. He's a source of stability for me. And really the only person who I truly experienced love from. But when I was 18 years old, I was like, man, I just want to do what those doctors did for him. I want to give people life. And that was the first time, and I'm being very honest, Doc, this is the first time where I truly felt like in reality, and I took control of my existence and was like, okay, we're going to go make something happen.
Wow. I love that, man. Taking control of your existence. That's some powerful stuff right there that I think a lot of people need to hear. And I'm assuming, because I'm going to ask you about your residency experience right here, but I'm assuming that's related to it, right? So take us through kind of, going through residency, what happened, what was going in your head at that point?
So definitely, the system is not geared up for taking care of people's mental health to start with, right? Mm-hmm. So if you go into that with any level of something, previous, right, it's going to exacerbate that, And when I was younger, I had concerns of like, I was like, maybe I'm a little bit bipolar. I don't know. So then I was thinking about a month long of night shifts, and I was like, yo, how many doctors have had manic episodes that were exclusively due to the high dose of stimulants required of residency and night shifts, man, alternating night and days, right?
Yeah.
So remind me of the original question. I'll be going on tangents.
Yeah, no, not a problem. So take us through kind of what residency was like for you, right? And what was that decision for you how long were you in it for?
2 years.
2 years. Okay. And then what was that decision for you to say, I've had enough. I'm actually just going to step outside of this. And then, like I said, take control of your existence.
Oh yeah. That was another final step, right? So for sure, the first step into taking control over my existence was when I was 18, right? So that always stayed in the back of my mind to, you have to do you first. And anybody who has any kind of, mental health history will tell you this, that, my routines, my rituals, my habits, and my mindset, they're not a choice. Like those are the things that I have to have, right? My values, I have to follow my heart. Otherwise things go really bad, really fast. So I can't do anything other than that. So when I got to residency, the moral injury definition of burnout really hit. Moral injury in that you feel unethical doing some of the stuff that you're doing, right? You're providing care that sometimes is not the best care, right? Like you have just worked a 24-hour shift, and here I am managing somebody's like end of life complication potentially. And, you're a lot of times it's just really weird guilt because I have a certain standard to which I hold myself and I'm unable to reach that standard. So then I underperform, and that does what? It kills your heart, right? Because you're going against your morals of do your best, right? So that right there was a first symptom. Second thing was I'm just a scientist, man. I look at things, and certain things weren't adding up. Feeling like a little bit of a hypocrite. It's like we're supposed to preach health and wellness in this business, right? I don't even want to call it that. It's a calling to be in medicine, and a lot of financial incentivization and those kind of things that just didn't fit with my mentality of how I wanted to do medicine.
Yeah, I think your first point is so accurate, because I remember talking about this, at least, through social media as a third and fourth year medical student, that medicine's very selfish early on, right? I think we go through it initially so that we can learn, right? Like, yes, I'm trying to take care of the patient, but as much as the patient's there, I'm trying to get home early. I'm doing subpar care because I want to go and study to eventually, maybe down the road, pay attention to the details that matter. And I talk about this with my wife all the time, right? It's about medicine's very detail oriented, but it's so tough to pay attention to details that you don't really care about. You know what I mean? Like, for me, I love functional medicine, lifestyle medicine, integrative medicine. We've talked about this. That's what, if I saw them on a daily basis, my 100% of my attention would be there, right? In like day in, day out. But the minute you remove that, right, which is residency for a lot of people, because you have to go through things just to learn it, you're going to go through that moral injury in a way. And I totally understand what you mean by not, being a hypocrite, not giving that best care. And it's the reason why you're telling me, man, like, hey, just go do your coaching. And my co-host is telling me the same thing. So I think that point is so crucial, I think, for pre-meds to understand, especially, right, going in. I think there's this false ideal thought that a lot of pre-meds have going in, that, oh, the minute I'm like a med student, I get to see patients and do this, I'm going to be on top of it, and, blah, blah, blah. And you realize it's impossible to do if your heart's not fully into what it is that you want to do. So I appreciate you saying that. My next question is, the conversation in your head when you're thinking about these 2 points that you made, did you have a backup plan? Like, what was going to be your next step when you said, hey, I'm out of this residency?
So here's the next, definitely one more comment about that previous thing I had said. Was I agree with everything you said. An honest conversation about what medical school is, what residency is, and what being an attending is, and what the business side of medicine will be. That conversation never happened. And I talked to many an advisor, many a mentor, many a medical student, nobody told me. And that's why I kind of set out on that mission, is to make sure to inform people, because if I had known that ahead of time, I could have made some different decisions, or at least been more prepared for it. So definitely keep your ear to the ground, young folks who are in medicine. In terms of my ability to walk out of residency, which is, fair for what I'm saying is, I did not drop out of residency. I chose to do something that aligned more with what I was wanting to accomplish. Right. So at no point in time was there ever a decision where I wasn't performing highly and I was, say, not meeting my own standards or expectations. Like, I was doing great in residency. I was having the time of my life. I was really enjoying it. That being said, there was something tugging at me on the inside that was like, hey, you feel like you're called to something a little bit bigger and you want to put some time into it, and you don't have any of that because of this other endeavor. Now, at this point in time, I'm 29 years old, and I pretty much rocked just about every environment I've ever been in, except for the environment that I got to create, right? It was always somebody else's, So that calling to me was like, yo, if you can go through medical school, right? If you can make it that far, you are in the top highest level of in healthcare in general. If you can do that, you are able to manage emotions. You're intellectual, you're hardworking. You can do anything that you want to do. And I told this to my program director whenever I was an intern, because we're not getting some of the things that I felt we needed. I said, I can make more money picking corn than doing this. Yeah. And he was like, really? And I was like, yeah, literally. And I meant that. I just felt confident in my abilities to be able to put a plan together, because just because of that, reflecting on my life, like, if you can be a doctor, work in healthcare, you can do absolutely anything. In terms of a plan B, I had met somebody who had reached out to me, and she said, we could hit the ground running with a coaching business. She said she'll do all the business side of things. She'll manage everything. She said all you have to do is be the face of it and do the coaching aspect and do your thing, and just be in an environment and no limits where you can do what you want to do and speak what you want to speak. And to me, at that particular time, that sounded like, that was my ticket to paradise. Of course, there's some other things going on in my life that forced my hand to do that, because that's a big decision, right? I could never imagine making that without some extra prompts. But my brother was essentially like on his deathbed, and I had to go take a leave of absence to go take care of him. Father was also bouncing back from cancer. Really wasn't an option. I was like, I have to take care of my family or they are not going to make it. Right.
Gotcha, man. So you leave residency, you now have a new vision. What is that vision? What entails it?
So the future of medicine is the empowering, educating, and guiding people within their own homes. You have access to them 24/7. This whole, I only get to talk to them for like 15 minutes, that ain't gonna fly. People hate that. Providers hate that. Everybody hates it except for the people making the money, right? And that is coming to the public's eye. And plus, it would be different if it worked, right? If it were effective, it would be different.
But it's not.
But yeah, we're not. We should be one of the healthiest countries in the world, but we're not, right? So definitely, reflecting on some of these things, where I realized that, through the development of technology, that things are evolving rapidly. We are in the age of information and the implementation of information. So what I wanted to do was, one more thing was, medicine is 17 years behind the research. It takes 17 years to create a paradigm change that reflects what is actually correct. So that's, and nowadays time, that is archaic. Like that is, to be doing things like it's 2005, to me, like, yeah, no, it's just not going to cut it. So like, if we can stay at the razor's edge of knowledge and information, and then distribute that information that's credible, that's practical, that's easy and integratable into a lifestyle, eventually you can keep people from jumping into the river. When I was in residency, I kept pulling people out of the river. And eventually I was like, why are there so many people in this river? So you have to go upstream and figure out what's causing people to jump in. It's lifestyle. And as much as I love medications and surgeries and all that cool stuff, I could, you could reduce a huge volume of that just by giving people the appropriate education and information and giving them a little bit of guidance on how to implement that into their life. Because, like, I had PTSD. I was obese. I probably fiddled around with some things I shouldn't have. And that was all stemming from, it was just poor lifestyle management and a poor mindset and a lack of community.
Yeah, man. And you are someone who has shown that change, right? I encourage people to go on Instagram and look at your profile, man. You're absolutely ripped now. So to say you're obese and then you're doing it, I mean, it makes sense, right? That you're coaching, that you have the power to do this. You've gone through it. You've done it, right? So props to you, man, for that. What made you kind of pursue life coaching at least? Did you go through any type of certification, like courses? Like, what was that curriculum like for you?
Hell no. Man, life coach is somebody who's been through it and done it, right? So, for me, from somebody who rose out of poverty and then essentially had to take remedial tests to get into community college, and then to go from there to 4 years and then graduate summa cum laude, 391, play college football, and to lead my family along the way whilst balancing my own mental health, and then ultimately curing my mental health during the hardest time of a human being's life, medical school and residency. I felt very confident in my abilities to be able to speak that message from my own heart, not in a way of like, oh, I did it so you can do it, more from a position of like, I understand suffering. I truly do. Like I was horrific for a lot of my life. I went to some pretty dark places, and my ability to be able to find that little things that can empower people, right? So like the internal energy is very, very interesting, right? There's something deeper than food and sleep that gives human beings this rush of power, right? And I'm very, very interested in that, because that's what got me through a lot of those things, was diving deep within myself and quasi spiritual kind of experiences where you connect to something bigger that pushes you to places that you can't go. That being said, just a reminder, like, I taught a dumb person, that was me, to make it all the way through. I taught a dumb person how to heal their mental health. That was me. I taught an obese person how to become fit. That was me. So I can definitely feel comfortable sharing that information on how they can do it too.
100%, man. We are our biggest teachers and students, right? So the best experience we can get is from ourselves. Go ahead.
The human body is the greatest physician that we know. If we
Yes.
give it if we give it what it needs, it's going to do what it needs to do.
For sure. I want to touch on mental health now, right? So how big of an issue is it?
Massive. It's getting worse. It's only massive and getting bigger. It's everywhere across the board. So one of the reasons I always tend to broadcast what it is in healthcare, right? So about a quarter of doctors or so are going to experience a major depressive episode between their training and their practice. 50% of physicians know somebody who committed suicide or is thinking about committing suicide that's also a physician. So at 20%, or it's really 19%, of OBGYN residents have suicidal thoughts. 19%, right? Like you're talking about, it makes sense. Makes sense, doesn't it? It's a tough rotation. It's a tough place to be.
That is tough.
Which it's ironic, right? It's ironic. So if these are the leaders of health and wellness, right, then what's going to be happening down below that? It's bad, man. So the burnout rates, I thought it was just bad in medicine, right? That's what drove me down the whole burnout rabbit hole. No, everybody's burned out. You can go anywhere. So in society, it's about 50%. And there's been an excellent degree, and America is great at this. Corporate America, it knows how to get people to work to the bone.
Mm-hmm. There's this thought out there that mental health is being overblown, that there's this double-edged sword to it, right? That humans evolved with, wanting to survive. So stress is inherent to us. So when we see small stimuli that are supposed to make us anxious or give us a little bit of stress, because we're talking about mental health so much globally, everyone out there who hears it thinks that it's happening to them. Do you think that is an issue? Like, is there a certain criteria or baseline that has to be reached in order to define it as mental health? Or could even those, small stimuli that are causing us anxiety be classified into that bucket?
So there's an issue in the medical system in general with a weakness focus, right? So we tend to always look at what's wrong with people, and we don't ever look at what's right with people, right? I don't know if you've ever done a psych interview, but it's the most miserable thing that you'll ever be a part of. You essentially go through all the worst things that this person's ever experienced or been through, and you don't really ask them otherwise at the end, like, what's keeping you alive, right? At no point in time do you ask, like, what are you good at? How did you overcome? How did you cope? How did you proceed through this in the manner that you did? So I think in general, we have a tendency to focus on the worst aspects of folks and people. And if you broadcast, pretty much any mental health symptom, right? So mental health, all of the diagnoses, these are all spectrum symptoms, right? So everybody's a little bit depressed at certain times. Everybody's a little bit anxious at certain times also, right? So really there's a fluctuation in time and space of, you have to have the constellation of a bunch of those, right? So the biggest thing whenever I talk to people is functioning, right? If you are able to get through and you're able to do well and still experience positive emotions, then you are not mentally ill. You are still healthy, right? Whenever it starts impeding your function, your ability to perform your purpose, if it's in the way of that, now we're talking about something that you need to be addressing with a little more attention. That being said, I cannot stand it when people say that they're depressed and they're anxious and they're just a regular person that are being lazy and don't want to push through a little bit of pain, because that is doing a huge disservice to people who are actually suffering.
Yeah, no, thank you for saying that, because I think now with social media, right? I mean, we can talk about social media all day too, in terms of how
everybody's an advocate, man. Everybody's an advocate.
Yeah, right. Everyone's an advocate. Everyone's looking for follows and likes. Everyone's saying, I now have mental health, and that, I think that's what my question was leading to, is exactly what you said. So I'm glad you defined that. At least, it has to be getting in the way, right? I mean, that is what true dysfunction would look like. Bringing it back to you. How did you know that you overcame your mental illness? First, I'll ask you 2 parts. What did you do? Like, was there a specific routine or specific practice that you did? And then 2, how did you know that the switch was flipped?
So how I discovered this issue was my psychiatry residency. It was second year med school. Whenever I was reading through psychiatry, pre-clinicals, and unbeknownst to me, right? Like I thought everybody felt this way and had experienced these things. I was like, oh, flashbacks, nightmares. I thought everybody had
Mm.
those. It was like, no, or like spacing out of your body. And I was like, that's what's going on. So that's whenever it finally dawned on me. Of course, I refused to admit that, right? I was like, nah, that's just being weak or whatever. Or,
Mm.
like I said, I grew up in a different way where you just didn't admit any kind of that thing. So eventually it got to the point in time, it was my third year medical school where I literally just had to address it. It was not a choice. I was like, I'm so sick and tired of feeling this way. And I could barely, and I'm talking barely, get out of bed in the morning. And I was so anxious, I could barely breathe, and going through surgery rotations. And my brother was really bad with his heroin addiction at the time. And like, I was just feeling like trash. So I actually did something that, very few medical students do, which was use their own powers for good. And I went on PubMed and I started looking up stuff on how I can be better and do better. Right. So as soon as I stumbled across a couple of key informations that really shifted my whole perspective on health, wellness, and the mind game in general. So there was two studies that were most valuable to me. The first one demonstrated, it's called the meditative mind. Essentially what it was a series of meta-analysis of fMRI studies that demonstrated the change of neurobiology through time with meditative practices such as, yoga, Tai Chi, gratitude practices, all these things. So, young me, like, I'm thinking I'm stuck this way. I was very deterministic in my like, oh, your DNA, your genetics are what determines who you are. And once you're away, you can't undo it. No, not at all. Like, your DNA it's always shifting in three-dimensional space to do different things. It's a state of flow in existence. And then your neurobiology shifts in as little as 8 weeks, and they can measure it. So I'm sitting here reading this. I'm like, oh my God. So just like the gym, where you can work out your arms and they get bigger and you get stronger, the same thing is true with your brain. So as soon as I started working my brain out, I watched these things evolve. And the number one practice for me, I would say, would be mindfulness. That changed the whole game. Just like getting out of my head and being present in my body. For me, that was particularly powerful with like exercise, which is probably why I was so attracted to that at an early age. Of course, same thing was true for nutrition. We eat what we become. I got pretty deep into the inflammation and neuroinflammation, psychoneuroimmunology, very interesting stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So if we're swollen, right, if we're inflamed, your brain is also a little bit inflamed. And whenever that happens, it's like a low-level 6 syndrome. You're lethargic, you're tired. It's hard to think about the future, right? Your synapses they're not firing the way that they're supposed to be and receiving the way that they're supposed to be, because everything's all puffy. And that made a lot of sense for me, given the high levels of stress and some of the things that were going on in my life.
Yeah.
So putting those pieces together for lifestyle changes and attaching that to a higher purpose of like, if it's possible for me to overcome this, it must be possible for other people to do the same. And I wanted to share that and then that's the time I chose psychiatry.
Love that, man. Love that. It's kind of full circle. I look at your Instagram, I see what you tweet, you post, you do videos. It seems like you're always in flow, man. It seems like you're enjoying life. You know how to create positive energy kind of just like, on the spot. It seems like you've almost biohacked that in order to be able to charge your electrons up to the same frequency that you want to dial into, right? What's your routine like? Like, what is your process now every day? Is there something specific you do?
Man, there's a lot of things, and this is definitely something I dial in with the folks that I work with. Is that just like doing blood sugars, right? So if we try to chase it with insulin, right, we're always behind the symptoms, and this is the way Western medicine is in general. Is we're just chasing symptoms, right? We wait for something to pop up, then we treat it. For me, I of course, after several rounds of burnout and depressive episodes, you realize that, hey, I can't wait for there to be my house is burning down before I start throwing buckets of water on it. So the same thing is true with the mental health and the energy game. So being proactive about your energy, being strategic on it, right? So if we could put Dr. Darsh on paper and say, hey, if we could build his best energy, how would we do that? if you had a 1 hour time block or 30-minute time block to get yourself ready for war that you had to go to that day, what would that routine look like? So for me, Wim Hof breathing method, and then I go essentially straight into gratitude. Do about 15 to 20 minutes of yoga, and then I'll journal out what I want to do for my day. A lot of visualization also, right? So my big thing is like internal energy, right? And in order to do that, visualizing things that are very, very powerful to us, and seeing yourself speaking on stage in front of thousands of people. Visualize yourself hugging your loved ones before they leave you, or making the impact that you want to make impact with patients. That the things that truly make you want to be alive, those are the first things that I visit in the morning or anytime I'm in a point of struggling.
Absolutely, man. In order to manifest, it starts from the internal, right? The internal turns into the external, and then we're able to use that kind of law of attraction and the spiritual guide that we all have within us. Answer this question in any way you want. It's open. It's a little meta, but how much of life is mental versus physical versus emotional?
I break it down into four. Physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. There's like 4 ways that we can truly view the human life. To me, the mental aspect of things, that's going to be your logic and reasoning centers, right? So a lot of that really truly depends on the person. It's like I said, it's very difficult to get that to truly align with your passions, right? That's a fully integrated person. So that's whenever you achieve a whole new level. If you can get your mental game to match your emotional game, you're about to be on some superhuman behavior. And truthfully, that's the life that I'm trying to create, and that's where a lot of my energy comes from. It's not a perfect game. It's not. So in terms of the mental game, you have to sit down with those emotions, right? And figure out what are these things truly telling me to do, right? And then align that with your purpose. That's that spiritual realm. And once you have all those things in line towards the same direction, that this thing right here is the chess player, right? This is the governor, and your body is the army. So so if you have the general up here, not the governor, I don't want to use political figures, general, right? You want to use that general to put the plan together. The general is the one that wins the war. Emotions will get you feeling good, but that mindset, the mentality, that's what's going to put the actual things into play for you to execute on your higher order mission.
Love it. So a lot of what you're talking about is probably some of the lingo that you're using when you're even coaching, right? So let me start with this. What type of patients are coming to, not patients, what kind of clients are coming to see you? What kind of people are coming to see you?
For sure. So, I mean, obviously I have a history in healthcare and working with burned out individuals. That's my bread and butter, you could say. So anybody who sees my stuff and be like, hey, I truly resonate with the moral injury thing. I really resonated with the fact that this guy said, I'm done with this. I'm going to go live in a van and travel the country till I get my soul back. A lot of people, they relate to that experience, which I think is really funny because I thought it was just me on an island out there. So essentially, that's probably my go-to. That being said, anybody who has that sensation of, I feel like I should be doing something else. I'm putting in a lot of work here and not getting a lot of reward. And that's probably the truest burnout that there is. It's not an overworking thing. It's an under reward thing. They're not getting those powerful experiences that they need to be getting on a day in and day out. And, finally, somebody who can just relate to my story. I've been certified garbage in multiple ways in my past and was able to put it together for myself and many other people. So once that's the whole social proof aspect of it, is like, this guy has worked with a bunch of people and helped a bunch of people, from like heroin addicts, the absolute, hardest folks that you can imagine, to working with other physicians that are highly successful. Yeah. It builds a degree of trust in the person's mind. Plus you see the results on Instagram, you can scroll and see things.
Sure. Yeah. What kind of techniques and approaches are you using with your clients? I think I saw something just on Instagram about, somebody's about to go to the gym. So you're obviously using some physical fitness to launch some of that energy, but what other specific techniques, approaches do you use?
Yeah. So there's really 3 ways that I go about it. My 3 pillars are all about, the first one is lifestyle organization and optimization, right?
Okay.
So until, and this is where that mental aspect comes down, until we can organize your life, and the metaphor I always use for people is life is like music, right? So if it's like screeching and it's like all over the place and there's no rhythm to it, it's like, how could you possibly thrive or dance in that situation when you just want to like plug your ears and scream, right? And to a lot of people, that's the way a lot of mental health feels, or burnout feels. It's like, oh my God, just make it stop. So just like music, we must compose it. We must have certain rhythms on things that align with what you want to accomplish. So the first thing we do is organize that, sleep, exercise, nutrition, social interaction, your relationships, and some meditation and spirituality, those 5 pillars. Put those on paper, right? How do we create your best day? Once we've done that, we optimize your best day. Plug in some new things. Once we've done that, we create a week. And once we've gone through a week and we get it out there, then we optimize that. Then I'll put down a monthly schedule. We'll do that, and then we'll optimize that and do the same thing for a year. And so essentially the person is guaranteed to walk away with the sheet music for their life. So they can stand up there like Beethoven or whatever and just get it on. So that's the first form of it. The first pillar. The second pillar is high performance habits. There are just certain things that you have to do in order to be able to recover faster, to sleep better, to be stronger and quicker. And there's a bunch of evidence-based stuff out there. Andrew Huberman's lab. I don't know if you watched that dude's podcast, but my God, there's all kinds of crazy stuff. Yeah. Matt Walker, the sleep physiologist, absolutely incredible. There are certain ways to get to places faster and better and stronger that I cannot believe they do not teach in grade school. Right. You can make people superhuman. I made myself like in residency, like I said, I was my first guinea pig. I was working 60, 80 hours a week, managing my family, and I was still waking up at like 4:30 to go to the gym in the morning. And I still felt great throughout the day by using the right supplementation and attitude, and getting So that's the second pillar of what I do, is those high performance habits. And then the third one is just teaching people the mindset, right? There's a couple of key psychological principles that a human being must absolutely know. And the first one is, how do I self-motivate? Dr. Darsh, how do I get myself in a position of like, I don't want to do anything, to all of a sudden I'm willing to die for what I believe in, right? So that's a learnable skill. So that's a big one: growth mindset, positive psychology, all these good things. But those are the 3 pillars right there.
100%. Yep. Totally relate to all of that, man. I love it. You talked about how people relate to your story and the self-discovery aspect of it. And I truly believe it's because people aren't living their dreams out, like for you made that decision, you controlled your own existence. But a lot of people will say, damn, I wish I was Ben. I wish I could go on that cross country, living in a van and going around and discovering myself. How do you recommend people develop their own philosophy, their own perspective, so that they can self-discover?
The word meditation means coming to understand yourself, right? So spending time with, how do I operate? How do I think? How do I behave? What things make me want to go? What things make me want to stop? One of my favorite psychologists all time is number one thing is, do not believe in things that do not empower you. So if there's anything that crosses your thought, it comes through your stream of consciousness and it suppresses you, represses you, or makes you feel like you are less than, you say goodbye to it. If there's anything that builds you, gives you strength, gives you those tingles, makes you feel alive, then you grab it and you hold on to it very tightly, and your goal is to magnify that in your life. We as humans, this is the hard part, we don't have a huge role in choosing that, right? So for me, I didn't get to say like, oh, I want to do these things or those things. There were certain things I was called to do, like they were within me, just the same way that they're within you. So sitting with it and coming to understand those things and putting that into your life, that's starting point number 1.
Beautiful, man. I think it was Blaise Pascal who said all of humanity's problems would be solved if humans had the ability to just sit quietly and think for themselves. There's so much that we're missing out on knowledge within our own subconscious that we're not recognizing, that we're not taking out and putting into action. So, I love that. I've been doing meditation, even like 10 minutes, man, just sitting, like just being comfortable with silence, I think is huge, right? I go to the sauna almost every morning, and the amount of people I see like that just have to bring a phone with them. Oh, are you
right, that bored? Oh, I can't stand that, man.
I'm like, you can't just enjoy the suffering, like,
right.
Enjoy the heat. Yeah, just like, just get down with the elements. be yourself. Like, it's okay. You don't need to take it when you're taking a shit. You don't need your phone all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. Leave your phone back, leave and just sit with your thoughts, man. I think there's so much power within that. We touched a little bit about the state of healthcare right now. And I think we both agree kind of what the future looks like. It's going to be consumerism, right? I mean, people are sick of these 15-minute visits. They want the hour, 2 hour. They're willing to pay out of pocket for it if they need to. And they're willing to be the consumer to figure out their own labs. What does the future of mental health look like?
So honestly, it'll be very similar to the DPC model right now.
Okay.
Direct primary care. So it'll be similar to that, where people will essentially be buying packages, right? So, and the future of healthcare is really, truthfully, is a combination of coaching and physician work, right? So you have an ability to take the coaching to another higher level, where you have access to medical records and labs, and you're creating that together for them. So essentially, what it's going to be a lot of is like what I spoke on earlier, is going to be educating people within their homes, empowering them, and guiding them, more than simply a couple of minutes out of the month. That's not going to get the job done, right? It's just not going to get the job done. So we have to have a higher level of availability to the person. Of course, we can't do that with our time. So once you have a good understanding or a good hold of depression, anxiety, or whatever mental health thing that you have, you want to approve a process that works for the particular kind of person that you want to work with, right? And then, of course, these people are going to read the reviews online, right? Because you're not going to be able to have access to, say, true research. But word of mouth is the most powerful thing that you can possibly have. If you said that you cured 2,000 people from depression, people are like, all right, how'd you do it? You know what I mean? Like, shit, where do I sign? Especially if you're going through it. So something like that for me would be getting that highest level of access, which is looking towards is going to be an app that will help the person with those 5 pillars: sleep, exercise, nutrition, social interaction, and spirituality. So essentially, that'll be like like a portable virtual therapist, but it's aligned with everything that they want to accomplish. So a lot of mental health comes from, what do I do? What do I do? It's like, here's the plan that I created. And this is the difference. This is egocentric, right? It agrees with that person because they came up with their own plan. And then letting them engage in that. That's the powerful one. And then community, right? Online communities is going to be absolutely huge. They're already huge. That's like Facebook's whole model right now is communities.
Gotcha.
So between those two people, and then everybody gets together a couple of times a year for, say, an organized event, where you'd have that group or those groups, and you say, hey, we're all going to meet in like Sedona on this date for a retreat. And then all those people would pile in and go.
Yeah. Building social connection, man. I think that's one of the big pillars of the blue zones too, right? Where longevity really lives, is that we see those groups of people really, really rely on each other. Do you have any opinion on the psychedelics, LSD, psilocybin, low dose MDMA, any of those things to help with PTSD and other mental health issues?
Yeah. Take them all. So, I mean, the first rule of medicine is do no harm, right? And there's enough there's enough evidence out there already that demonstrates we shouldn't even have to argue this. It's wild to me, especially from somebody who we're so readily to throw out Xanax and opioids for decades, and we're now reaping the absolute horrors of that, right? For a while now, and we're so slow to grant access to these things that are. It's pretty obvious. It's pretty obvious that these things are extremely powerful for addiction, depression, anxiety, and I understand that you want to be careful with the psychedelics because it's Pandora's box. It truthfully is. There's a lot of power in them, and there's a lot of power for like danger with them also, right? So all of the psychedelics essentially, they are dependent on the experience that the person engages in during that healing session, right? So you can drop mushrooms on people, LSD, MDMA, and if you just throw them in a room, right, with a bunch of snakes, they're not going to come out of that like, oh, I'm not depressed anymore, right? So what these things are is a gateway to a transcendent state of being for them to see beyond their pain and suffering for even brief moments in time. That perspective shift is what brings the ultimate change in the person, because it's a change in perspective, right? So the actual mushrooms aren't like the cure. It's the
Right.
experience that changed your perspective that is the cure. But yeah, same for ketamine and all those things. It's going to be the future, man. We got to quit. We got to quit being afraid of them. We just got to learn to be better with them.
Yeah, man. Like you said, 17 more years. So until that research comes to
Bro,
medicine.
it's a not. Yeah. Well, so remember I said I was Native American, dude.
Yeah.
So like, the peyote, right? Like we were we started that. You know what I mean? We started that.
Yeah.
So like,
Ayahuasca and all, right?
That's what. Yeah, it got me very interested in that at an early age. I was like, and I was reading the books of one of the older, older medicine men, and this was after all the genocide and being put on reservations and everything, and he was essentially like the only one left. And he was writing in his books. He said, "There's only one thing that seems to give the spirit back to the people, and it is peyote." And I think that's exactly why it was removed, because you can't have that if you're trying to suppress a certain group of people.
Yeah.
So another big thing I always point out to people is there's two groups of people that fought back against the American government from within. The first one was Native Americans, shout out. Second one was hippies, shout out again. So what happened to both of those people? They had psychedelics ripped out from underneath their culture. And because they're creating that change that doesn't go with the man.
Yeah. And for people that don't understand, I mean, that's been a known issue, right? In terms of marijuana and the legalization now. And when we look back at the history of marijuana, that's a critical part of it, is that suppression. Well, dude, you've been spitting facts. I want to keep it going, man, because I know there's so much, but I want to get a little deeper into the perspective, man. So we got a lot of pre-meds listening to this, as well as medical students. What's a piece or two of advice that you'd give them, especially knowing your journey, what you've gone through? What would you tell them?
The first thing is to have confidence in yourself. And that comes foremost before putting any kind of confidence into the system. Same thing with the government or any other body that's, seeking control. It can provide a framework for us to exist in. We tend to we almost treat it like a religion. And I think that's especially true in medicine, where we feel like guilty if we don't study. I feel morally like fractured if I don't study 120 hours a week, or I feel like I have to do this so that I can live out my purpose. And that's you're boxing yourself in and you're limiting your potential. Within you is the ability to do anything that you want to do. If you want to impact millions of people, you can go and create that. If you have the talent to get into medicine, then you can absolutely go find a way to hit millions of people and create that change and to find a way for you to live out your purpose in a grander way. So that's what happened to me in residency, is I truly had to look at myself. And honestly, in medical school, I had somebody who was a billionaire that looked at me and said, she said, "What do you do, Benjamin?" I said, "I'm a medical student." I said, with my chest up, I was like, "That's right." And she goes, "You're wasting your time." I was like, "What you mean?" She goes, "The smartest people don't go to medical school, Ben." And I was like, "Oh." So that hits, right? So that means empower yourself. So we might think that medicine is like the holy grail, but truthfully, you are the holy grail, and don't ever lose that sight and doubt in yourself. The second thing is just have an objective lay of the land. Is that many a man and woman better than you have gone through the system and been absolutely destroyed and killed themselves. So that's right. So 50% of people, yeah. So it's very, very, very common. So knowing that going into it, do you think that you're going to be the person who just like overcomes it? Like, no, right. You're a human being. You had better have a formulated plan on how to do that. If you need that, reach out to me. I'll get it to you, or at least an understanding on how to get started. So being proactive, like, I know I'm about to be extremely tired, extremely overworked. How am I going to manage that? Right. So be prepared.
Very true, man. Wise words. What would you tell 5-year-old Ben with all the knowledge you have now?
It gets better, little homie. It gets a lot better. Right. Do you to the fullest, bro, and you can never mess up, to be honest.
I love it, man. I love it. Well, dude, what is next for you? What are your plans? What's your vision like coming up? What do you got going?
Man, all kinds of stuff, to be honest. So like I said, I got this high performance mental health is the name of my clinic. I'm a general practitioner, but I work with primarily mental health patients, pretty much exclusively mental health patients. That's what I feel most comfortable with. That's where I'm called.
Mhm.
And I love merging that with, lifestyle medicine tactics to create some of these things to get people better, faster. So essentially merging that with coaching. Like I absolutely love that, the speaking aspect. I want to land a TED talk. I want to be like you. You know what I mean? When I grow up, trying to be like Dr. Darsh over here. But really speaking the message out there, dude. So, I feel like I had the keys that really helped me unlock, my best life, dude. And I feel compelled and like literally like I have to tell people. It's just not a choice anymore. I'm like this far away from being the guy on the corner with the sign that says, Jesus is coming again. But really it's like, but really it's like meditate, drink water, and go to bed on time. You know what I mean?
Just stand on the corner, meditate, drink, go to bed.
Go to bed. You're gonna be fine. You know what I mean?
I love it, man.
Yeah, I would say long term though, man. Gonna get a book out. Gonna keep on the speaking tour. And, hopefully someday we'll just be able to build a clinic where anybody can walk into those front doors and feel welcome and find a place of healing. Also world travel stuff.
Absolutely, man. Hey, well, if there's anyone that can do it, man, it's you. Man, I feel like you're like my long lost brother, dude. Everything you're speaking, I'm just like, oh, this is hitting the energy. Like, I feel it, man. I'm loving everything you're saying. I mean, when I meditate, these are thoughts I have, and there's so very few people that you can have these conversations with. You know what I mean? Like at this type of level with that type of understanding. So I'm just hoping more and more people can start to awaken, quote unquote, get woke, I guess, for lack of a better word, and start to think about these things and start to build a better version of themselves. So truly appreciate you coming on here, man, being vulnerable, being an open book, speaking the truth. I know people listening to this will want to find you, want to listen to more. Where can they get your information? Where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm all over Instagram, and I just started a TikTok too. I gotta, unfortunately, have to go viral to get a message out. And that's
Dude,
like
same. Same.
I'm like, I don't want to do this shit, man.
I'm with you. I'm like,
but right. But then, I had a profound moment when I was in the red light therapy session this morning, where I was like, hey, you are in a blessed time where you have access to millions of people and you have a message to preach. And you already know that the news networks aren't going to do it, man. Yeah. So it's a blessing to be able to do these things. Is it a little annoying? Absolutely, but it's a temporary sacrifice for a higher gain. Yeah, Dr. Banerjee on Instagram, Dr. Banerjee on Twitter, TikTok, and really my Facebook page, Breaking Burnout for Healthcare Professionals. That's my number one go-to. That's like my living room where I have these honest conversations with people. I do guided meditations. I'll break down topics for people. I give all my free resources out on like, how do I plan my ideal day? I got worksheets for that. You can bust that out in 45 minutes and increase. You can 2x your energy, 2x your sleep, all these kind of crazy things. So if you have any interest in that, by all means, just hit me up on either Instagram or Facebook. We'll get you the link to that and get you enrolled. Other than that, LinkedIn, if you're real boring, I'm on there too.
Dude, I've been posting more on LinkedIn, trying to reach that older boomer crowd, right?
Yeah. TikTok Darsh is not LinkedIn Darsh.
It's not. They're like the exact opposite, and I'm doing both, and I'm literally going through personality just in order to try to figure out who I am.
Let me tell you, man. I can't even recycle material anymore. I used to be able to post. I used to post on all platforms. You can't do that, man. People on LinkedIn are like, who's this idiot?
Not anymore.
You're gonna get no love on Instagram.
Well, we're going to link everything you just mentioned into the show notes. And then, Ben, our last question we ask everyone is, how do we put the health back in healthcare?
Root cause, man. So first of all, what does it take to make a person actually healthy, and then actually focus on those things, moving from a weakness focused towards a strength focus? What makes people well? Focus on those and do them every single day and watch what happens to you.
Love it, man. Wise words. Well, Ben, thank you so much for coming on here again, dude. Truly appreciate you.
That's a blessing, bro. You hit me up anytime, man.
Appreciate it. All right. Thank you so much for tuning into that episode. I hope you guys were all inspired by Ben's message. I mean, he was definitely vulnerable, and I know I was inspired by the deeper perspectives that he has gained throughout his life. And I think the struggles that he has overcome is truly inspirational for all of us in order for us to become the best version of ourselves. So whenever you have those tougher decisions to make, I really think it's important to rationalize through them and not only think about how it can affect us in the short term, but also the long term. So I think we all have it within us to pursue a great life, a destined life full of passion and purpose. And again, guys, if you are enjoying these episodes, please make sure to leave a 5-star rating and review. It really helps us out, and it helps our guests out to get their message out to people who may not have the chance to listen to them. And if you want to see short video clips, we now have those available on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. So if you want to see what our guests look like and what different topics they're talking about, be sure to check out those socials. And as always, the medical disclaimer: everything in this podcast is for educational purposes only. It does not constitute the practice of medicine, and we are not providing medical advice. No physician-patient relationship is formed, and anything discussed in this podcast does not represent the views of our employers. We recommend that you seek the guidance of your personal physician regarding any specific health-related issues. Until next time.